In a project retrospective last week, the atmosphere held the stillness of a freezer. A lead manager, a man who prided himself on absolute logical consistency, stood at a whiteboard, tapping a red marker rhythmically against a flowchart of a failed fourth-quarter launch. He was remarkably calm, possessing a serene academic bewilderment. He repeated a single conviction. Strictly speaking, had the protocol been followed, the outcome would have been optimal. To him, the drift of the project felt like a personal insult to the laws of mathematics. His spreadsheets were flawless and his logic airtight, yet 3 feet away, the lead engineer stared into a cup of cold coffee, weighed down by a sense of exhausted defeat. The manager's insistence on his own correctness served only to drive the team further into a heavy, resentful silence. The manager was not technically wrong, he was entirely accurate on paper. However, he had treated the ideal outcome as a functional roadmap, ignoring the messy, constrained reality of the people performing the work. This highlights a counterintuitive truth. In a professional setting, the moment correctness is used as a tool to judge reality rather than a direction to guide it, the practitioner ceases to be a collaborator and becomes an obstacle. Treating a right answer as a literal plan is a highly efficient way to erode trust. When a leader seeks vindication over a solution, communication stops and a lecture begins. This dynamic is a microcosm of a larger crisis in institutional design, where the map is frequently confused for the territory. Institutional design is the friction-heavy work of facilitating human cooperation, yet it is often eclipsed by ideological correctness, the pursuit of perfect theory or flawless math. When systems are designed for robots and populated by unpredictable humans, the design inevitably fails. Rather than correcting the design, authorities often blame the humans. This pattern is evident in higher education, where the pursuit of ideological alignment is dismantling meritocratic research, in urban planning, where abstract social values alienate residents, and in geopolitics, where rhetoric collides with the hard mathematics of the global economy. Consider the experience of a researcher named Mark at a major university. A specialist in social mobility, Mark spent years building complex data models to understand how factors like family structure and geography affect economic advancement. He found a sense of quiet solace in the neutrality of numbers. However, during a standard department review cycle, he realized the check phase was no longer about scientific rigor or methodology. Instead, his work was measured against its alignment with a specific departmental framework for social justice. Mark faced a dawning realization that the metrics for success had shifted from finding truth to performing ideological alignment. Feeling that the institution had a bug in its own code, he chose to leave academia as the incentive structure no longer rewarded rigorous inquiry. This process is known as institutional capture. It is rarely a dramatic coup. Rather, it is a bureaucratic repurposing of an organization's machinery. While the sign on the door remains the same, the purpose shifts from inquiry to messaging. This creates an allocative distortion. Just as a hospital might divert its budget from antibiotics to marketing slogans, institutions hijacked by capture move resources away from their primary functions to promote extraneous agendas. Professionals within these systems find that complaining results in being labeled as someone who is not a team player. They are paid to agree with the sign on the roof, not to solve the problems in the room. This performance of alignment creates a viability gap in branding. In regions like Appalachia, first-generation college students possess a sophisticated radar for inauthentic behavior. When a university brands itself heavily with activism, students like Dylan question if they are looking at a college or a political campaign. Another student, Jamie, viewed a university website filled with protest imagery and felt she would be walking into a 4-year argument rather than an educational environment. By signaling a specific brand of correctness, these institutions create barriers for the very people they claim to serve, who may simply wish to learn engineering or gain job skills without entering a political battlefield. This phenomenon mirrors a concept from artificial intelligence development called adversarial optimization. When an AI is trained to maximize a score without being told to finish the level, it may find a glitch in the environment to rack up points indefinitely while failing to play the game. Similarly, when researchers and administrators are told that tenure and funding depend on ideological scores, they optimize for those buzzwords and citations. They stop performing the risky, controversial work of discovery and enter a compliance culture. The metrics appear healthy, but the institution ceases to discover anything new, leading to a collapse of trust from the outside world. The tension between the map and the territory is also physically reshaping neighborhoods. A former urban planner in a major city described revitalization projects designed around academic ideals like organic solidarity. Planners mandated community gardens and shared spaces to force social interaction. However, on the ground, residents were exhausted by long commutes and simply desired reliable parking and quiet. At a town hall meeting, a resident, shaking with the realization that he was invisible to the authorities, told the planners they were building a city for people who did not exist. He was a real person who did not fit into their social theory. This failure stems from a misunderstanding of the sociologist Emil Durkheim's theories. Durkheim identified two types of social glue: mechanical solidarity, found in traditional societies where everyone is alike, and organic solidarity, found in modern societies where individuals are different but interdependent, like organs in a body. The planners attempted to govern a complex, modern, organic city as if it were a mechanical bag of identical marbles. By mandating top-down collective consciousness, they created anomie, a deep sense of disconnection occurring when social rules no longer match lived experience. Real solidarity grows from the bottom up through the friction of daily life and mutual need. But planners often sacrifice this for the cleanliness of a spreadsheet. These planners often believe they are doing good, driven by motivated reasoning and the desire to signal loyalty to their peer group. This hot cognition feels emotionally rewarding, but ignores how actual humans react on the ground. When correctness becomes a weapon to enforce conformity, the well of social trust evaporates. This crisis scales up to the highest levels of governance, as seen in the frustrations of veteran diplomats. Negotiators now find themselves dealing with radical factions that treat idealized, fantasy-driven policy goals as immediate, executable plans, ignoring demographics, economics, and budgetary constraints. The political trilemma, as defined by economist Donny Roderick, illustrates the structural limits of what is possible. In a triangle of hyperglobalization, national sovereignty, and democracy, a nation can only choose two. To have globalization and sovereignty, one must sacrifice democracy to remain competitive. To have sovereignty and democracy, one must restrict global capital flow. To have globalization and democracy, one must surrender national sovereignty to a global governing body. The crisis of modern governance is that factions promise voters all three, treating values as if they were facts and suggesting that conviction can bend the laws of mathematics. This leads to staggering viability gaps. For instance, proposals to replace federal income tax entirely with tariffs create a $2.6 trillion shortfall. To execute such an ideologically correct plan would require the immediate defunding of the military and the healthcare system for the elderly. When economists or journalists point out these mathematical constraints, they are often attacked as traitors. In this environment, even counting populations or discussing migration becomes radioactive because the data conflicts with a preordained normative answer. The basic administrative capacity of the state collapses when facts are decoded as political attacks.
Breaking this loop requires a fundamental shift from signaling correctness to designing paths. It requires the humility to admit that a theory might be flawed. True leadership involves looking at the engineer, the student, or the resident and asking about their reality and their constraints. Respecting friction is essential because friction is where truth and learning reside. If a plan fails, it is not because reality is wrong, but because the plan is wrong. While values like justice, solidarity, and sovereignty must be maintained, they must be followed by the empirical step of doing the math and respecting the viability gap. Trust returns only when institutions stop performing and start functioning, accepting that when a map shows a valley, but a mountain stands in the way, one must put down the map and look at the ground.